Hello and welcome to the B&H virtual event space. It is the third Wednesday of the month, so that means it's Westcott Wednesday. I don't know if you know, but if you didn't, not only are we being joined by Westcott top pro Joel Grimes to take the mystery out of working with strobe lighting, but he'll also have an important announcement to round things out. Joel, welcome to the event space.
Well, Fred, thank you. It's always a pleasure. I love to talk about photography, the creative process. I love gear. It's always fun to have, just the not only just the tools, but the outlet to have a creative process and make images. So.
Yeah, you've definitely found the right audience. So, um, I know he's got a lot to go over with you all. So if you've got any questions, please leave them in the YouTube chat. And you can always rewatch this or any of our other Westcott Wednesday webinars from 2024 on the BH Event Space YouTube channel. Joel, let me get out of the way. I'll see you at the end for some Q&A. Let me know when you want to start this slideshow.
Okay, good. When it comes to lighting, I think that there's kind of a mystery about it. And if you're like me, when I started out, I didn't know what to do. I mean, there were some resources, but not really. I was kind of fumbling when I first started. I wanted to be a working photographer. I wanted to use strobes. I came out of the fine arts with a degree in photography from University of Arizona. Didn't teach us anything about strobe lighting. I did take a portrait class. Most of what I was doing in college was landscape. I was using a large format camera. I kind of fumbled in the beginning, but I had this driving desire to figure it out. So I'm going to give you guys a kind of a quick presentation on sort of how I break down lighting. And I've been teaching this now for about 15 years. So this is going to be a little bit of a shorter version of that, but I think you'll get it. And so, Fred, do you want to put up my slide presentation part? And then so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some pictures because some of you may not know what I do. And I'm a stickler for lighting. And I think part of that is I am colorblind. And so when you have I wouldn't call it a handicap. I would call it a deficiency in some area, but I make up for it in others. And so when you have something like if you're 8 feet tall, you're looking down. If you're 4'2", you look up. And it changes the way you approach life. And so being colorblind, one of the things that I love is lighting. Something about lighting gives me the sort of like I'm looking at every little bit of where that light is falling on the subject. Are these advancing, Fred? It's not advancing. We've got, let's see if it goes.
All right, let's give it another try. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second.
No worries. I'll keep talking. And so one of the things that I do is when I look at, as I'm building a photograph, I'm looking at exactly where that light is striking the face. I think that, I don't know why that is. I'm zoned in on it. I don't look at color. If someone's got a red shirt on, I'm not really interested in that. Let's see if we can go to maybe the second slide. It might be, Fred, that first slide is just not wanting to go. Do you want to maybe start on the second slide and see what happens? Oh, there it went. Okay, here we go. So now this is a shot done outdoors. Obviously, I'm strobing from his right, camera left, and I'm setting up that light in the exact position where I want light to strike this cowboy's face. It's not, I say there are some accidents that happen, but for the most part, it's extremely thought out and planned. Now, this is cross light. We're going to talk about cross light, top down light here as I go through the presentation. Two lighting approaches that if you learn, you'll be able to rock the world. I'm telling you, it comes down to really that simple. All right, so here's cross light. I'm using a door on the right as the open to his garage, and I got a big softbox, a Westcott 4x6, I think it is, their biggest softbox, and I'm pushing the light in the direction it's already going. So I might mention that a few times because that's a very much of a key to lighting. Um, Again, here is, now this is a composite. So I've done composites, but you know, what doesn't matter to me is how it's done. Is it impactful to my audience? Here is a 3 light approach. So I have a top down light over him, 24-inch beauty dish, and then 2 edge lights. And it depends on, sometimes I use a 3x4 edge light with grids. But look at the lighting on his face. I have the light striking him where I want it. It's like I said, it's very well planned out. It's for a reason. And I look to build drama in my images. Here's an ad campaign shot that I did. It's my sort of my signature edgy lighting, 3 lights, but top down light, 24-inch beauty dish, 2 edge lights. And so I use that combination a lot. Here's the same thing. Now, the reason why this looks a little softer, I say because it's a female athlete, is I've increased the light above coming over the camera down to her. I've increased the value to not build as much contrast. So I'm softening it down a little bit. Actually, that was a 5-foot octo over my camera. And so here's another drama. I use a 24mm lens on a lot of my subjects. We're not really talking about lenses, but I love drama. I love creating images. Now this one, I just happened to drop this in here because I shot this a couple weeks ago, well, maybe a month ago. I did a whole thing on night photography, portraits at night. And this is actually lit by the lighter, lighting a cigarette, and one little light on the back. But here's another studio stuff. I got top down. Oh, this is cross light on the left with an edge light to build an accent. On the right one here, the black and white, that's cross light with a little accent also. So you'll start to see a pattern of how I work, because one of the things that I do when I get a subject in front of me is that I've done all my experimenting ahead of time for the most part, and then I go and shoot. So I'm not trying to fumble when I have a subject in front of me. And that's one thing that as a commercial advertising photographer is you don't fumble because you don't look good when the client sees you, trying to practice or whatever. No practicing during a shoot. It's all been predetermined ahead of time. Now on the left here, I have a bare hood simulating sunlight. And you're going to see this because I started doing this about 1.5 years ago. And so it's harsh light, but then I have a big softbox behind me filling in the shadows. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So when we get through these images here. All right, so you'll see this kind of some of my work here. I love setting up my images. Now I don't overly plan in terms of what I'm going to do in terms of what the subject will do. Usually that happens when we get the person, I get them in there, we start talking about what they like, what they want, or some ideas I might do. I built these flats, these V flats, and then I started using those in my, doing my portraits. Again, drama, I love drama, and we're going to talk all about how to do that. I love portraits because it's a revelation of I think the soul in a way, people. I love people. I love the challenge of photographing. This is top-down light here, by the way. Here's top-down light. Did 100 days on the road photographing Harley-Davidson riders across America, 13,000 miles, 36 states. And I approach the same portraits the same way every single time. Same backdrop. Well, actually, it's a gray backdrop. I'm adding texture later, but it's the same approach over 100 Harley riders that I photographed. And so once again, I do that because I want to build a body of work that's uniformed, that looks like a series. And that was that Harley series. Here we have just kind of a fine art stuff using that harsh light. Here's some of my older sports stuff. And we're going to get to, this guy, I asked him to kind of laugh and he threw his head back and I snapped it, and that was my favorite shot from the series. Top-down light, by the way. My 3-light approach, 24 millimeter lens. Here's a 24 millimeter lens. Edge light, 3 lights again. And I think we'll get to here's cross light. Beautiful. Cross light is so gorgeous. It's classic. It's been around a long time. It will be here for a long time. And that's one of the things I love about the cross light is that it's very, very, it really gives your subject a beautiful look. Here's top-down light, wide-angle lens. There's that simulating sunlight again. And here we go. All right. We're going to talk about the basics of lighting, and let's get started. So one of the things I talk about is that the photographic process is a creative process. Yes, we have technical things we have to figure out: f-stop, shutter speeds, lighting ratios, the inverse square law, all these things that we have to sort of figure out. But in the end, when we go to lighting, there's really no right or wrong. And I know this sounds weird because when you go to school and you say you go to a photography school and they go, here's here's clamshell lighting, here's how you do it, and then here's whatever cross light, Rembrandt, here's how you do it, and then you have this formula that you're supposed to learn, and then you work around that, and you never break out of the formula. But I think that there's no right or wrong, meaning that if you develop something, a look or whatever it is, and it fulfills your vision as an artist, it's right. Now, it may not win over a lot of people, but as an artist, how many people do you need to win over? That's the whole question I always have. Do we need to win over everybody? No. All right. So as an artist, my goal is to make photographs that are impactful, interesting, dramatic. And I hope that in the end, I create a photograph of someone, since I'm a portrait photographer, that they go, wow, this is something I absolutely love. And it makes them look flattering. I always say that I like to make athletes look like superheroes. I like to make beautiful models look like super top models or whatever. You want people to look and they say, wow, that is the best shot ever. And when an athlete comes up to me and says, that's the best shot anyone's ever done, that makes me feel really good. So I want to make flattering images to my subjects too. So I mentioned this already. To simplify, and this is what my job as an educator is to do, to simplify lighting, let's break it down to top-down light and cross light. And if you get those, you can pretty much do anything out there. And I like to make it as simple, like I always say, I want to make it as simple that a third grader can figure it out. Here's cross light. So you have a shadowed side on the face or on the back of his neck, or, his head, but you have light coming across the subject. Okay. I love that. And I showed a couple of these already. Cross light, top-down light over here. That's a very small modifier. It's an 11-inch Westcott deep dish with a diffusion sock on it. And it's 11 inches from his face. I'm shooting right underneath that light, and it's really close, and that cuts a shadow across his cheeks, and it's really dramatic. It's just something I started doing. And then here's my 3-light. I showed you that one there. Dramatic. I love building drama, and the edge light kind of does it. Here's cross light again. Okay, so these are examples. Here's a 3-light approach, but you kind of got this light coming around the subject, and then you'll have a top-down light to fill in the shadows in the front. All right, let's talk about quality of light. This is important because if you want to simplify it, you have 2 options. You make your light harsher, or you make it softer to your subject. Those are really the 2 things that you're going to do to build lighting. Now, there's been all sorts of terms. You go to a specialized school, and some of you maybe listening have done that. There's a lot of terms that we can use, but I want to simplify it. I look at my subject, the light on them, and I go, it's too harsh. Oh, I want to make it softer, or I want to make it harsher. I know how to do that, and I'm going to show you. All right, so let's talk about 2 main factors. It's actually 3, but I've got one that's sort of built into 2 parts. If you can learn these these two factors, you can create any light scenario out there. And so here they are. Factor number one, the size of your source, and that's your modifier, we call them modifier, and the distance it is from your subject. Okay, so think about this. You have a softbox. Now, I used to remember watching a photographer work. They have a 5-foot octo. They'd put it up and I'd watch a behind the scenes or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I love that. I go out and buy the 5-foot octo. I go out and get a model and I set it up and my pictures sucked. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't understand that the size and the distance it is from my subject are going to determine the harshness or the softness. Very critical. The second part is how much bounce or ambient light coming back in the scene. So I have one light set up, and even if I'm in my studio, if I bring in, let's say, there's no ambient light, no outside light, or I got my lights turned off, my overhead lights of the studio. If I bring in a piece of foam core or a reflector, it's going to bounce light back into my subject and it's going to soften it down. So I can control my harshness or my softness by the size of my modifier and the distance it is from my subject, how much bounce or ambient. Now, when it comes to ambient, if I'm setting like a shot up and I have that old guy sitting in his garage with all the outboard motors, and I have my power coming through my strobe, and let's say I get an F11 light to my subject, then I'm going to change my shutter speed to bring in the ambient. Now, you don't want to go too far because then it flattens your whole light out and you go, oh, that looks terrible. Or you got started getting hot spots on things. So you feather your shutter speed, so you adjust your shutter speed until you get that perfect balance. And by opening up your shutter, you're going to bring in more ambient, which softens it down. Okay, now let's keep going. I hope you guys understand how I'm going here. All right, so the source. I have this statement, I've been saying this for at least 15 years. The larger or smaller the source and the modifier in relationship to the subject, the softer, the harder the light. So I'm always thinking about, in my head, as I get a portrait set up, a couple things. How much distance, how much room do I have in my studio? Am I up against a really tight, a scenario and I can't back a light up? Well, that determines what size modifier I'm going to do. How much of that modifier do I want to fill? Do I want him head to toe? Do I want just the face lit? So those are things that are in my head as I start choosing what size modifier and I want and how far to put it from my subject. And it takes time, I understand, with practice, to get to feel how to go approach. But all right, to soften the light, you got to either move your light closer or get a larger modifier. Or, like I said, brings in some bounce. Harsher light, yeah, get a smaller modifier or back it up. I think you guys now know. I think I've made my point. So when we talk about this ambient and reflective, a lot of times when I was shooting, like for commercial work, I'd have a CEO in his office and I was going to photograph this guy, and I'd have cross light coming in, but then there would be a big wall, a white wall over to his opposite side of where the light was. And all of a sudden it's bouncing way too much light back into my scene. And I'm like, oh, so for years, I still carry black cloth to tack up or put on a boom or something to absorb the ambient light to give me more control. And so also, if you have like curtains or shades or whatever, you can kind of bring them down to maybe adjust your ambient light coming in. So I'm always looking at how to control my light and the ambient around me. So here's a quick one. The shape of the modifier. I used to think that, you had softbox, you have beauty dish, you have octaboxes, you have the lanterns that come down there, like throw light everywhere. It's not the shape of the modifier. Okay, people come up to me and they go, oh, I got this brand of modifier. It's like God's light. It's so incredible. I go, it's just a rectangular box, folks. There's nothing special about it. Now, if it's built really well, that's good. You pay for that. But the shape has nothing to do with the quality of light. Now, when it reflects, that will reflect into your eye or into a bottle of, whatever it is you're photographing, glass, as something that reflective. You don't want to use usually a umbrella reflection. You want a rectangular, especially when you do product. That's a whole nother thing. All right. So if you can get this in your head, that when it comes to the modifier, it's how broad it is in relationship to your subject. The broader that light is, the softer it's going to be. So I think I've got an illustration here. All right. Let's see if this works, because we've converted my Keynote to PowerPoint. So it's a little choppy, but let's see. So let's say I've got a subject and I've got a small modifier and I put it right over the camera. It's not a good illustration here, but I'm going to do the best I can. The point I want you to get is so important that if you get this, this will change the way you look at how you set up your lights. If I go and bring this small modifier, let's say it's a 24-inch beauty dish. I found from my, as an artist and my style of photography, I love a 24-inch modifier to be 24 inches from my subject, and I shoot underneath it. And I get the best quality of light that I like to my subject. Now, every subject can be a little different, so I might want to adjust that if I have a beauty or a cowboy, depending on how I want to approach. But that's a good starting point for me. 24-inch beauty dish, 24 inches from the subject. If you have a 20-inch beauty dish, put it 20 inches. If you have a 28-inch beauty dish, put it 28 inches. That's a good place to start. Now, so what happens here is two things. One is, and it's not perspective very well here, but is that if I put a small modifier up close right over the camera, it's going to light the face and not the feet, right? So that it tapers the light down to darkness. I like that, but not all of my clients are going to want me to do that. The other thing I've noticed is that when I have a white wall and I put it, like, say, 3 feet behind my subject, if I have a 24-inch beauty dish onto my subject, I get a very dark gray background. Even though it's a white paper or white cloth, whatever it is, it turns a dark gray. All right, I'll get into that in a second. Now, so let's say my client comes to me and says, "Oh, you know what? I don't want too much drama. We're selling sweaters or whatever it is, and a jacket, and we need the jacket lit too. We're not selling shoes, but we need the face and the midsection lit up." I will take a medium softbox and back it up, so a 5 foot would be around 5 feet from my subject, and now it spreads the light further. And it's the same broadness to my subject as a 24-inch at 24 inches for my subject. A 5-foot octo at 5 feet gives me the exact same broadness to my subject, and they look almost identical in terms of on the face. Now, but the 5-footer spreads light more. And I'll show you in a second, because this animation is not 100% going here. If I have a 7-foot at 7 feet, I get the exact same broadness. So look at the way this angle goes. So what I'm doing is I'm replacing one modifier in front of the other. If I take the one out, then it's the same broadness in relationship to your subject. I get the same quality of light on the face. However, watch this. If I take the small one out, that background now turns lighter gray. It's the inverse square law. And I did a whole thing on this. It took me a couple of weeks to build out in a master class. But basically what's happening is the distance between the subject and the background are the same, but the inverse square law lightens the background up because it's because your light's further away, and so therefore the ratio is shorter. I think I'm saying that right, to the wall. So it's lightening up the background. So if I take the 5-foot out and I put a 7-foot up, I will light that background pure white, or just a little off white. But it's pretty good for what I want in terms of commercial shooting. And so a client comes to me and says, "I want a white background, a white sweep. I want it white." The first thing I do is I get my 7-foot out. If the client comes to me and says, I just want the face lit and a lot of drama, dark down, I get the 24-inch beauty dish out. So you see where I'm going, but I can also go change the value of the background by what modifier and the distance it goes to my subject. All right, another telltale sign is the shadow edge reveals how broad your light is to your subject. And I always say this, if you want to simulate sunlight, the sun, you have to get a light with a small modifier or the hood on it and back it up to where it's the same size as the sun to your subject. Now you can do this by going outside. Go outside with the sun, 10 o'clock in the morning, and there's a wall, and then you take your hand and just put it up and say, what's the shadow look like? Take your iPhone, snap a picture of that edge light, the shadow with the edginess of that shadow, go into your studio, do the same thing, just back your light up until that edge matches what the sun does. That's one way to figure it out. So the edge reveals the source and the distance and the size it is in relationship to the subject. So if you look at a photograph and go, oh, I love that photograph. How do they do that? Well, look at the shadow edge, and that'll tell you, that'll reveal a lot. All right, so I'm telling you the basics. Now, what you have to do is you have to grab a subject and go play. That's how I learned. I didn't learn this from a book. I didn't go to a specialized photography school that taught lighting. I had to go and figure it out. And what happened is with time, it started to fall together. All these pieces, the mystery started to come up, reveal. And I'm like, oh, now this makes sense. And so it's really fun to be able to go and create any photograph that comes to your mind. Now, here's one that's very harsh. It's a harsh light, which I avoided for years. But now I love it because I'm filling in the shadows enough to where it works. Now, if I didn't have a softbox behind my head, my camera, filling in the shadows, those shadows would be pure black. I could put a piece of foam core around and bounce back in, which I did for, I tried that for a while. But with a softbox behind me, I have more control. I can power up, power down very easily. So I started doing harsh portraits about 1.5 years ago on purpose to create a look that I had avoided for years. Now here's, this was shot with the new Westcott FJ 800s we're going to talk about in a minute. But this is outdoors. I've got one edge light coming from his right, the camera left, and then I have a softbox of 32 by, is it 32 by 56? They call it a 3x4. And then I have the ability to power it up to where the background goes dark to build drama. Here's top-down light, very simple, very dramatic, very easy. Oh no, the one on the left is cross light, sorry. The one on the right is top-down. Cross light, beautiful, love it. I spent 25 years doing cross light. Top-down light, again, very beautiful. Top-down light, very close to the subject. Here's cross light. So you can see my pattern going here, top-down light. You can use it in 100 different ways to mix it up. Here's edge light, 2 edge lights, and 1 top-down light on location. Cross light. The one on the left here is top-down light. On the right is that simulating sunlight with a modifier behind my head filling in the shadows. Simulating sunlight on the left, top-down, that was that 11-inch. Here's a 7-foot octo, really close, right? I mean, I'm close with a wide angle, kind of a wide angle lens. And then that 7-footer is behind my head, literally filling her in. So there's hardly no shadows. All right, top down light. I think you guys get it by now. Cross light. I have a few more. And then we're going to talk about strobes. I love it. I love it because I now have control over what I need to get what the end result I have. It's not like I'm going to go out there and fumble when I do a shoot. I just did a campaign where I had a car shoot, and we were doing lifestyle, And the producer at the end came up to me and said, I've never seen anyone that makes decisions about lighting quicker than you. And I gave me a big compliment because I'm making decisions quickly because I understand what I have to do. All right. Part two, let's talk about strobe lights and what do we do if we have to make a decision on how to buy and what to buy and all that kind of stuff. This is a big mystery. There's too many options on the market sometimes, and we get overwhelmed. All right, so there's 6 things that I think that you need to know about strobes, and so I have used just about every strobe that you could possibly have on the market. Started out in the 80s, the big power pack, the Speedotrons, the Normans, the Calumets, all those were on floor big power packs with the cord going up into a head. And then you would, there was no, well, I don't know when the monolights came out, but it was power packs on the floor. That's how I started. And I used to call them boat anchors. They were so heavy. So the first thing that you want to ask is, how much power are you going to need in a given scenario, right? So the output is what is important to you. Now, you got speed lights, you got Westcott makes these little 200 FJ200s. They're little teeny things. They're great. You have the 400 units that have been around for a while. So how do I go and determine what light and power that I need? Well, there's one benchmark that I have to work around every time I go out in full sun, especially out here in the desert. If you're in the Pacific Northwest or up where, in New York or somewhere where soft light, a little bit softer lighting, East Coast, you might get away with a little bit less power than if you're in the desert. In the desert, it's brutal. You have that sun, and we call it the sunny 16. So I have to figure out that my sun is going to give me f16 at ISO 100 at shutter speed 100. That's the base mark for me that gives me a image that's what we call a correct exposure in pure sunlight. Now, if I want to use a strobe to influence that subject in the outdoors, then I have to get a light that's puts out more power than a sunny 16 rule. And that's where the challenge is. Now, so here's let me Fred, why don't you put me up here real quick on the screen, because I get all animated, I get all excited. So when you put a light in a modifier, all of a sudden you're killing your power to the subject. So you might have a pretty strong strobe, but now you're like, oh, I took it outside and I can't get enough power to my subject. Or if you back it up, all of a sudden you're going, I got this, engagement picture, or a wedding, a bride, and I'm out there and my lights don't have enough power because you put it in a softbox. So if you have a bare hood, you can probably usually get some pretty good power to your subject. You put in a modifier, it kills it. And so you have to have this in your head. What is it you're doing? I like portraits pretty close. Right. So I don't usually shoot. Well, I did the Broncos team portrait for 10 years, the Rockies team portrait for 7. And I had 50 people to strobe outdoors at 11 o'clock in the morning in Denver, which is very harsh light. And I had to have a whole bunch of lights to fill in everything, 50 groups on a stadium kind of backdrop. That's a lot of power. Okay. But that's very unusual for me. But the other thing is like, if you do like a cowboy with a horse, now you got to back it up a little bit. And it's like, ooh, I need more power. So the Sunny 16 is your baseline for what you need to think about when you're outdoors. And so when you're in a studio, you can get away with a lot less power. If you're shooting at late light, you don't need as much power. If you're doing night portraits like I just did this masterclass on, you don't need hardly any power at all. So it depends on the environment that you're shooting. All right, so Fred, why don't you put me back on the power keynote? Okay, Sunny 16 is my base mark. Number 2. Let's get to number 2. I'm clicking. It doesn't like it. Oh, there it goes. Portability. All right. Portability is important. So if you're getting on an airplane, or if you're, if you work out of a little Honda and you don't have a lot of room to carry gear, portability is important. So self-contained units like the monolights that we have today, the monolight designs, are very popular. The power packs on the floor have kind of lost their sort of appeal in the marketplace, unless you have a huge studio and you never leave the studio, right? Your power packs on the floor are typically going to give you more power. But if you take it outdoors, how are you gonna run it? We used to take generators outdoors. The problem with generators is that you have to match the surge that goes into your power packs. And I used to blow up power packs all the time because the generators were put too much surge through, and boom, there goes a power pack. So there was a huge risk when we were used to take power packs out in the field with generators. And then when the monolights came on along, and then battery packs on the back of them, oh my gosh, it changed the world. But we had smaller output strobes as a general rule. So then we had to look at that. So portability is important, especially I spend about 200 days a year flying around. I need portability is important to me. Getting stuff on an airplane. All right, there's a bunch of key factors or features that I think are important. I mentioned battery powered, self-contained units. High-speed sync. I hope you know about high-speed sync. You've probably heard that term if you've never actually done it, but that allows you to raise your shutter speed beyond the sync speed. So most cameras are around 200, 250 a second. You can get up to about 4,000, 8,000 of a second. Now it has to pulsate, and you start to kill your power output when you get to the top, output range. We'll talk about that in a minute. Flash duration, if you've got sports and you want to freeze action, that's important. I've done a lot of that over my career. Color accuracy, well, I'm colorblind, so, and I've shot catalog work, but generally, the strobe color accuracy is not as important to me, but some people, they swear they have to have color accuracy in their output from the low power to the high power. Bluetooth, can you connect your phone to it and have an app? That's sometimes important. You can trigger it. Now, a wireless trigger, obviously that's the norm today, but the old days we had cords, PC cords going all over the place. It was a lot of work to set up your strobes in the old days. We're in good times. But that's some key features you need to think about. All right. You need to think about the strobe that you're buying has a system. Is it a system to where you can go and say, oh, I need this to do that? Oh, they make something for it. And so now usually in the marketplace, you can find a solution if you really work hard enough. And there's a third-party company that says, oh, you need this to go from this strobe to this adapter to do that, whatever. But if you have a company that has a system and they've thought out all the little things that you need to go and build a strobe system, that's important, from modifiers to, So one of the things that I like about Westcott is that I did this night photography portrait masterclass. I took their little LB60s. Now they have the LB 120s. They're continuous lights. They're little teeny things. And I was able to put those into my existing modifiers that I've already got. So I didn't have to go and buy another set of modifiers or try to find an adapter for it. Westcott had it all. So it's a system that you buy into. And that's very important when it comes to looking at so you say, I got this really good deal on a strobe on eBay. Well, does it have a system? What's the name? Who's behind it? So that's important. And price. Price is a big one, right? Because we don't have an unlimited budget. And if you're going to buy 3 or 4 strobes, you want to know that, they're not going to, if your strobe costs more than your car, you might be in trouble. And so when I was starting out in photography, I was 19 years old. I had a car that was worth $300. I paid $300 for a little Volkswagen. And I bought a camera system back then, Mamiya RB system, medium format, that cost me about $4,000. And my dad heard about that and he flipped. I worked all summer painting houses. And so I had a cheap old car, but my gear was becoming very, very expensive. But I was sold out to be a photographer, so that's why I put my money in it. But price is always a consideration. So look at a system and you say, whoa, that's going to cost me a lot to get into that system. Well, and light is light, folks. I've had more people on my comments in my over the last 10, 15 years that have said, "Oh, you're a professional. Why don't you use this brand?" I'm like, "Why? Why?" And light is light. So if someone tells you that a certain manufacturer is God's light, well, I would question that. If light is light, does it have the features you have? But price is very important. And one thing I didn't put on here that is, I think, important too, is if in fact your strobe goes down, can you get it serviced? That's another thing that's important. I forgot to put that. That would be number 7. Let's briefly talk about watt seconds, and this is important. Um, and that's kind of a mystery when they say watts. In the old days, I would have let's say 1,000-watt power pack on the floor, and it was by one manufacturer. And then another manufacturer would have a 2,000-watt power pack. And when you put them side by side, the 1,000 put out more power than the 2,000-watt pack. Why is that? Well, because manufacturers, especially in the old days, really didn't their watts were kind of overused, right? The real true thing is guide number. What kind of light does your put out via guide number? And you can have charts on that. So look at, what kind of power does it really put out? And again, it depends on what hood you put on. If you put on a hood that's going to have a little more telephoto, it's going to have you more output and a higher guide number. So there's a lot of cheating going on in the industry. And so you have to be very careful at what you do, but be careful when it comes to that. And a lot of times you just ask photographers and say, what does this compare to? And they'll say, oh, it compares to this. You go, oh yeah, I know that. I've used that. Okay, good. All right. So let's talk about, this is where I want to get to, and I think we're getting close to my end here. And that is, if I go from a 400-watt strobe, the Westcott's had their 400-watt strobe out. I've been using it for 5 years or so, and I've got 4 of them, and I use them nonstop. What does a 800? And so Westcott went from 400 to 800. They skipped 600. They went to 800. And what does that give me in the real world? That's what I want to know. And so I'm going to give you a little, because I've been pushing for an 800-watt for, if you talk to Westcott, I've been on the sidelines going, when are you going to put out a more powerful strobe? Okay. So benefit number 1 is that I can darken my background when I'm doing a strobe outdoors by 1 extra stop. I can knock it down 1 value darker with a 800 strobe versus a 400. So my creative control jumps up to where I have more options. I can darken the background down. To me, that's very important. All right, I can back my light up further. Number 2, if I have a subject where I have a couple people and I want to back my light up to get, cover more people, then I have that ability with a more powerful strobe. All right, I can use number 3. Well, I missed number 3. Well, okay. Number 4, 3 is a secret. I'm not going to tell you right now. Number 4 is I can use a larger modifier. Large modifiers eat a lot of power. And so, you go, oh, I want to put on a 5-foot octo, but that's going to eat too much power. And outdoors, I can't afford that. So now I can use a bigger modifier as an option outdoors. Now, when it comes to high-speed sync, the flash has to pulsate. And so when you get to your, what we call full power on your strobe and you're doing the high-speed sync, it's not really giving you 100% full power because it can't recycle fast enough. So that's one of the problems with high-speed sync is as you start to raise your power output, the demand is too great and you start to lose that top end. I use a lot ND filters, which solve that. But what I'm saying is with a more powerful strobe, I have the ability now to go a little bit higher end on my high-speed syncing settings to give me that look. And I use the high-speed sync to do a wide aperture lens, like a Canon f1.2, wide open, and have a super shallow depth of field in harsh sunlight. And that's what a high-speed sync will do. And ND filters will do it too, but high-speed sync is great. And it also gives you a shutter speed if you want to freeze action. All right. 6, a fast recycle time at half power. So let's say I have a 400-watt unit, and I got somebody jumping, an athlete. I want to do a lot of popping, a lot of, maybe every second I want to fire an image off. Well, a lot of times what you do is you take your strobe and go to half power, and then you can get that really fast recycle. Well, if you have an 800-watt unit, you can now go to half power, and you have now basically 400 watts at a super fast recycle time. So it's an extra little bump in options that give you, if you have a unit that's a little more power output on the high end. All right, number 7, and this is really important. I've been a working photographer for 45 years. And when I do client work, I don't always get to shoot early morning or just in late afternoon. When I used to shoot annual reports in the 90s, and I was going nonstop. I get up before the sun, shoot all day, and until the sunset. And so a lot of times I would be stuck shooting at the worst part of the day. And so when it came to power, there was that time and day where I'm like, oh, the clients asked me to do this. If I don't have the power, I got egg on my face. I can't do this. This strobe I've got is not powerful enough. And they don't want to hear that. So as the demands of my clients happen in the real life, it's really good to have that extra power. And so that's what I think. All right, so let's go. Westcott's announced their new 800 and 400. 400s, a new series of 400s, a new 800. I've been using the 800 the last couple months, and I'm absolutely blown away by it. I love it. I am so excited and to be a part of Westcott. And so, Fred, why don't you bring back and we can get to where we talk about the strobe or any other questions you might have regarding strobes and all that.
All right, sorry about that. I am here, and we've got some questions from our YouTube chat. Not necessarily about lighting, but still important to ask. Are you tethering when on location? And if you are, what software are you using?
Okay, so in the early days, I tried all sorts of things. I tried tethering straight from my computer to my camera, and I was teaching a workshop or I had a client scenario. Twice I had someone hook their foot on the cord and rip my laptop onto the concrete. That happened to me twice, and I said never again. So I went to the Cam Ranger. I started using the Cam Ranger. It's not a perfect system, but it's pretty darn good. The connection is about 98% or whatever. Depends on, if you're in a conference with with lots of people using Wi-Fi, sometimes you get some weird connections. But overall, the Cam Ranger has been my go-to for the last probably 10 plus years. And, so a lot of people use on things like that. I do not like to tether to my laptop. Now, there are times when I have a client shoot, we have a tech person we hire that has a whole system. They show up and you plug right into their system, and they're downloading the cards as you go, and they're got on one, not on one, but Capture One. That's what I meant. Capture One is the go-to when you're and a client standing over it, art director, whatever. If that case comes up, I hire a tech person to do it. So now there are, for example, there are like Canon and there's you can go get an app where you can trigger your camera from remotely. And so if you have to do that, but the other thing too, I'll mention this. When it comes to a client standing over me, I tell the client, look, if you have to look at every frame that I'm shooting, it's going to bog this whole shoot down. I want you to be happy and feel comfortable what's going on, but I can't go click, look, have a look, click, have a look, click, have a look. It just slows the whole thing down. My goal as an advertising photographer and someone who's got a subject in front of me is to get them in and out as quick as possible. I've shot billionaires, Congress people, $100 million athletes. I mean, I don't have that much time to fiddle. And so I don't like to be tethered in that scenario.
They were also asking, how are you putting in some of the backgrounds? I'm imagining it's for the backgrounds for the outdoor, it's just literally controlling your ambient light, right?
Yeah. So if now I was doing composites. I mean, I did
Oh,
everything
okay.
in camera for 35 years. Then I did composites, and now I do almost everything in camera. I don't do composites anymore. But yes, it's knocking down the value of the background. It looks like it's almost a composite because you've got this scenario. Okay, let me back up. This is important. If you watch my tutorials and when I go, I get very excited. The thing about being an artist and creating the image is you want to give your viewers something they don't see every day. Because if you see it every day, it's boring, right? By me knocking the background value down and I have a subject, a cowboy, whatever, I'm pulling that subject out away from the background. And it's not realistic, meaning that if I'm standing there, I don't see that dark background. But my strobing and my combination of everything gives me a darker background, which separates my background or my subject, and it looks cool. And it's like, it looks different. And so I always say, do something that is not what everyone sees every day. That's why a long exposure on a waterfall looks cool, whereas frozen water, it just doesn't have the same look. Because we see it there. I like the long exposure stuff.
So we also have another question. I think I'm going to tag on another question to this one because of the new lights. Um, Charlie's asking, do you continue to adjust your lighting throughout a shoot, or once you reach your desired lighting, does the emphasis shift over to the model for the look you wish to achieve? And the question I'm going to tag on is, since you have experience with the new 402 and the 800, have you tried the creative masking feature that is new to the lighting?
Well, okay, so I did the masking feature with the older 400s. I used them. I have a whole tutorial on that, on how I did masking. It's actually pretty cool. I did this whole thing where I would take two exposures, or actually two strobes, one's lighting the background, one's lighting the subject, and I would go pop up, and it would have the one exposure, I have the background lit and the subject lit, and the second exposure, I have just the background lit, so the person's silhouette. Then I bring it into Photoshop, and then with a soft brush, and there are layers on top of each other, I paint in the light where I want my subject on the face. It's a cool technique. And so I was doing a whole bunch of stuff, testing that when it first came out. And the other part of that question was what? It was,
Oh, do you continue to adjust your lighting throughout the shoot?
okay. So what I do, and this is very important for me, is that because I'm kind of dyslexic and numbers and f-stops and fractions and all that, I get confused, right? So I try to make my setup as easy as I can as I'm walking through the process. So here's what I do. I set my camera settings up. So I'm in a studio, 200th a second, f7.1 if I'm going to have a good depth of field, and then ISO 100 or 200 somewhere around there. Then the only thing I'm changing in power output is my lights. So if the edge light's too hot, power it down. If I want a little more shadow detail up, power that up. So I'm just changing the output of the lights up and down, not my camera settings. And a lot of photographers, I watch them, they're doing both. It's like, whoa. I mean, talk about my head spinning, right? Even though I've been doing this a long time, it overcomplicates it. Oh, I think what he's also saying is this. So let's say I have a subject looking straight into the lens and I get all my lighting perfect and that person turns sideways, my lighting's going to change. So then I move my lights to follow the position of the face. Usually it's not the output of the power, but sometimes it is. But I usually just move it a little bit to kind of follow it, and then boom, I go back and shoot a series like that.
Yeah, one of the things that I was impressed about the creative lighting feature that's on no, the creative masking feature is being able to just like you mentioned, cycling through just different lighting setups. If you had enough of the Westcott lights, you could set up almost two or three of the lighting setups that you like, your cross lighting,
Oh,
your
right.
overhead, your just background, and then you can cycle through each of them and mix and match as you need. I just thought that and all within, not without having to go to each light and turn one off, turn one on, because it knows for each shot to do a different setup. I thought thought that was really a neat idea.
There might be a scenario for sports photography where that really could come into play. And here's one of the things that I love. Okay. A manufacturer will create something, a feature, and they go, this is for food photography. And then I look at it and I go, wait a minute. I can use that for one of my scenarios for a sports scenario, whatever. And so that's one of the things about photography is things are introduced, but don't always just go by what they say it's used for. Find another reason to use it. And then you're the only person on the planet doing it. And then you look like a superstar because you came up with some cool technique.
We've also got another question. Is there an average time you spend on a subject at a photo shoot?
Well, okay. So if I'm doing a athlete for a client and I've done, some of the big $100 million athlete type people, they give me 15 minutes.
Mhm.
I have to be my act has to be together. I have to have everything. There's no room for error. Bam, 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 bam. But here's the thing. I'm fast. You have to be fast. And I know photographers, good buddies of mine, they are so slow. And I'm like, how can you get away with moving that slow? They're like, and so that goes back to this. And that is, I practice a lot with subjects and I get my lighting down. And then a subject comes in, I got 15 minutes, nail it. And I look like a hero because they go, how'd you get all that in one 15-minute session? I go, because it's not rocket science. I've done it 1,000 times. That's why you don't try something new. So clients have done this to me where they go, oh, can you have our athletes swing on a chandelier and do a backflip? And like, whoa, 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 whoa. Before we go into that, I have never done that before, and I don't know in this time period if I can, figure that out. So and then you don't want to agree to something that is 100% failure, and then you look bad. So I always say maybe you try that next session.
Yeah, that reminds me that I think there was a quote, something about luck being a combination of preparation and timing. So,
Yeah, no, preparation is something that gives me extremely confidence. So I had someone come up to me and say, hey, do you ever get nervous photographing a celebrity or, someone that's, very important? I go, no. They go, oh, you must have veins of steel or whatever. I go, no, I've done my preparation.
well, Joel, we're just about at that time. Is there anything you'd like to leave the viewers with in terms of this intro to strobe lighting and how they can take themselves further into it?
Well, here's my encouragement to you. I am barely a C student. I got dropped on my head when I was 2 years old. My dad said I was pretty smart up until that time. I went through a fine arts program, which was how to take a picture of your shadow. And no, it was a good education. I'm happy I have a fine art education. It taught me how to be an artist. But I had to learn to be a working photographer and to get to my end result. I had to go out and learn it. And to learn it, I had to practice it. And to go and say, I always tell people, grab a subject and just go out and make a lot of mistakes. And then you come back and you go, you know what? That didn't work. Oh, that worked. I'll do that next time again. And so as you go through this stepping process of making mistakes and getting a little bit better, then you go like me, where I'm on set, I'm like, boom, 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 boom. It's like all natural because I've done it so many times. I used my kids when they were little, growing up as subjects. I would give them a candy bar or a soda pop, and they go, oh, Dad, not again. And but so I'd use them, or I'd grab the neighbors, a UPS guy, whatever, just to get subjects in front of my lens. And so with that, I practiced. So there's nothing. You can get a master's or a PhD in lighting, but until you go and do it, you're not going to know it.
Great. Joel, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Very cool.
You made it real clear for anyone starting with strobes, and it was also a great refresher for any seasoned portrait photographers.
Absolutely. Well, I'm always learning something new. when people say, "Oh, you're the master of light," no, I'm not. I'm still learning. I'm 67 years old, and I hope by the time I hit 80, I'll have it figured out.
All right. Well, thanks to Westcott for putting this together. Keep an eye out for more Westcott Wednesdays coming up in 2025. We've also shared a link to learn more about the new strobes in the chat. So if you're interested, be sure to click. Joel, thank you again.
Fred, thank you.
With that, this has been another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. Enjoy the rest of your day.